All right, we're going to go ahead and start. Welcome to BCIU 107. We're looking at page views, time spent on site, users, what they are and what the analytics mean. This is more or less a review. So what we'll be doing is a lot of question and answer during this period. If you don't volunteer to answer, I will call on you. So first of all, what is a page view? A page view is when one user looks at an individual web page on the internet. Mark, describe for me you making a page view on the Durango Herald website.
I go on there and then it slows down my computer and I struggle the rest of the night. No.
You asked.
I did ask for it. That is indeed an example of
I
a
would
page
assume
view.
jumping on and checking out a story, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what a page view is.
All right.
So why are page views important to us? And, I think I've talked about this a little bit before, but from the advertising perspective, sometimes people sell share of voice, which is to say you get 10% of our audience, whatever that is, and it costs you this much. And so you can sell that to 10 people for 100% of the audience. So at that point, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it does because you want to give users or advertisers the most bang for their buck. But if you have 100 page views, then they've paid X amount for 10 page views. If you have 1,000 page views, they've paid X amount for 1,000, for 100 page views.
Just so, like when Moorheart buys an ad, right?
If they're selling share of voice.
So what?
It's called share of voice.
Share
So their ad goes on our page.
Mm-hmm. And so let's say it's the Cortez Journal. If they're selling it by share of voice, the ad goes on the page and they get 10% of the ad impressions. So if we have 100 page views, they'll be seen 10 times. If we have 1,000, they'll be seen 100 times. But you sell it based on what traffic has been in the past and say, hey, it's been about 1.5 million a month. We're going to sell you 10% share of voice for, I don't know what our ad rates are, X amount. Or some ad folks sell it by, and when you sell share of voice, you sell page views, and you also say, hey, then you can bring in those other analytics that we're talking about, and we're going to delve into here, that is, hey, so not only do we have 1.5 million page views on the Herald site, but our users spend an average of about 2.5 minutes a session, which means they're seeing your ad, they're not spending 10 seconds in bouncing. So there's, if you have 1.5 million page views and they're spending 10 seconds in bouncing, that's not good for an advertiser. The other way we sell it is by available impressions, and so we have 1.5 million page views a month. There's an average of about 4 ads on a page, and so there are 6 million ad impressions available a month. So those you sell by impressions, and you can say, for X amount you'll get 1 million impressions. For X amount you'll get 50,000 impressions.
So you mean, so what, just getting back to, they buy 10%, they get seen like 10 times out of 100 page views?
Mm-hmm.
And that's called an impression?
That's called share of voice.
That's a whole different
Yep.
thing.
They're two different things. And maybe I'm convoluting this a little bit by telling you what ad folks send, but I think if you can get to the gist of it, it helps you understand how these analytics don't just impact us, but also impact what we're selling.
And who do they sell that to then?
All of the advertisers on our sites. So, right now, what you'll do is share of voice a lot are sites that have smaller audiences. So Adventure Pro right now is share of voice because it's got about, I think, 10,000 page views a month. The Herald, we sell impressions because we have so much inventory to sell that it's more profitable for us to sell impressions.
And what's an impression?
An impression is every time somebody sees an ad. So if you see our page, like one page, there's typically 4 ad spots on it.
Mm-hmm.
So one page view typically equals about 4 ad impressions.
Oh, I see what you're getting at.
Because you've got the little San Juan impression up there, you've got the box impression on the right, there's normally a leaderboard, there's normally a leaderboard on the bottom.
Mm-hmm. And does that also include sponsored content?
That's a different thing, and we use a company called Nativo for that, and that's a whole different package.
That's different. Okay.
Yep.
So they don't sell the click-throughs anymore, right? On how many times people hit that ad?
No, but they do use that as a metric. So, hey, you've sold it. You've bought 15,000 impressions. Your what is it? CPM. I think it's what they call it. I forget what it stands for. Is the click-through rate?
Right.
Is 1 per 1,000. So they do give advertisers those analytics.
Okay.
But what we sell are the impressions or the share of voice.
Right. Okay.
So that's a little bit down a side road there, a little bit of a red herring. But I think, the more information we have about who uses this information in our building, the better. and our side buildings, Cortez and Bayfield, sorry. So what is the importance of page views? So it can be the importance of how much inventory we have to sell. Or on our end, on the news end, it really helps us show how many stories readers are looking at, how much time they're spending reading, what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong for things like headline writing, story content, et cetera, et cetera. And so the advertising impressions are what I just kind of went into a little bit, probably too in depth. But so if we have one story that has 1 million page views, obviously we're doing something right with that story. Or it's gotten picked up by one of the big dogs and linked to. You know, if we have a story, and some of our sports stories are like this, where they only have 300 page views and they're really good and we think they should be getting well read. The small number of page views doesn't mean it's not good quality content. It means we're not doing the best job promoting that content sometimes. And so I was telling somebody, Shane, I think this morning, that any number can be interpreted positively or negatively. And that's, you know, when I talk about SEO, it's not just writing for a computer, it's always using your brain. So, like, if we have a sports story that has 300 page views and it's a kick-ass story and we know there's more than just, like, Little League parents' reach, then we're doing something wrong on distributing that content, and we need to look at what we're doing and make a more informed decision moving forward. And so, page views, whether they're high or low, can help us decide how to make decisions on our content. And it's really important, and it's important in real time, which is why we have that chart B going right now. So here I'll delve in a little bit. We talked about this a little bit, but a page view versus an ad impression. A page view is when a reader lands on a page, like the sports page. An ad impression is when they see the ad spot on that page. So let's go to the web real fast.
How do we know they see it? Just because they went to that page?
I'm going to show you right now.
Cool.
So we can track impressions. So using sports as the example. So right now I am on the sports page and I have 2 ad impressions, right? I've got this little dude here. Oh, now I got 3 because that one loaded. So if I clicked off before them, though, I only had 2. I had this one and this one because this one hadn't loaded yet. So now I have these 3, right? And so it can see that I see these 3 ads. Now if I'm scrolling, I get down here and I see this ad. So there's a 4th one and a 5th one here. It can tell that I scroll. It can tell that I saw them. If I'm up here, then this page only had 3 ad impressions, unless I clicked off it right away before this one loaded, and then this page only had 2 ad impressions. Does that make sense? So it really is what you see, and that's why we say an average of 4 ads. I think all of our pages have at least 5 ads on them, but because you're not always scrolling, readers aren't looking at everything, those, you know, there's a slightly less conversion rate there.
Is it possible to block the Herald from, or to block websites from reporting what you see? In other words, reporting that information back to the Herald?
It probably is. I don't know how. You know, it's also, there's also ad blockers. They say something like 20% of people use ad blockers. I was in a webinar about a month ago for the Herald to look at how profitable it is to go through and find these people, these companies that are blocking your ads, and asking them, if you ask them to remove your website from the ad blocking software, they typically will. But you have to find them, you have to ask them, you have to have this back and forth. And I think it was Washington Post that put on the webinar, and they said in the end it's not really worth it.
It'll block all those ones too? I thought it just blocked the pop-ups.
You can do a pure ad blocker.
Okay.
You can do a pop-up blocker, you can do a pure ad
How do I
blocker.
get that?
Let's not talk about that, because
All
that's it's how we all get paid, y'all.
Hey, I'm all for it. It's just quicker to go on the site.
For sure. But yeah, so there's typically more ad spots on websites and pages, and on the Durango Herald, and I think Pine River has a couple, maybe about 3 ad spots a page. Pine River, or the Journal is the same as the Herald, it's about 4 to 5. So, and like I was saying, just because the reader's on a page doesn't mean they saw the ad, and it will track that. If you don't scroll down to that ad, or they don't load in time, then it's not counting that as an ad impression. And people really commonly confuse page views and ad impressions, and they're not the same thing. And so I spend a lot of time clarifying that, because they're not the same thing. They can be the same thing, but they're not always the same thing. It's the whole, a rectangle's always, what? A square is always a rectangle's not always a square.
Parallelogram.
Yes. All right. So a user is a unique device that accesses our website. So let's go with David. How many unique users are you?
One.
Really?
Or no, I've got two. I've got two browsers open with the website on each one, so I guess I'm two.
What about at home?
I don't really read the paper at home.
But you go on the web, right? I mean, we're not just talking about. It's not talking about just the website, but you go online at home, right?
Yeah.
And then do you have a smartphone?
Yeah.
Do you have a iPad or Kindle?
Yeah.
So far David's at 5 unique users.
Okay.
So the point here is just to, keep in mind that when we say user or unique user, we aren't always just talking about one person. We're talking about one device. And so just always keep that in mind, because people tend to say, oh, 500,000 people saw our site. Well, 500,000 devices saw our site. The math conversion on that is wiggly at best. All right, what is time spent on site? Katie?
Time spent on site, the amount of time that the user spends on the site. Per visit? Yes!
We actually call it per session, but yes, it is per visit.
How many page views are you saying?
No, but it's about the amount of time they spent on. So David, as one unique user, goes to Durango Herald for work and spends 5 minutes on the page. That is his time spent on site for that session. So he goes on tomorrow and spends another 5 minutes. That's not a 10-minute time spent on site. It's because it looks at per session. So it's 5 minutes at one session, 5 minutes at second session.
Oh, yeah.
So then, in a not so complex math problem, or complex for journalists, you take all of those uniques, you take all of that time added up spent on site, you divide them, and you get the average time spent on site, which what we aim for and what all 3 publications typically have is about 2.5 minutes time spent on site per session. So that is one thing that we've talked about with Chartbeat a little bit and with Google Analytics. So Google Analytics pings your computer about every 5 minutes. If you're not doing anything every about 5 minutes, then it will consider that you're off the site. But it will ping you every 5 minutes. So,
But I mean, if I move it, after 8 minutes, it'll find me again?
It'll find you again. And then that's the thing about Chartbeat that's so great, is Chartbeat pings your computer every few seconds. Mm-hmm. And so if you're not scrolling around, it's not counting you right away. Okay. It doesn't give that 5-minute kind of wait time. And so that's the benefit, and that's why if you look at the newsroom and the reporter, they're a little bit off. So then, as you were talking about Cliff, there's also pages seen per session, and that's the number of pages somebody looks at during their time on the site. So our typical user spends about 2 minutes and 30 seconds and looks at about 2.6 pages during that time. That's on the Herald. I think the Journal is about 2.4 pages, and the Pine River is actually higher than that. You guys have a little bit of a stickier audience. I can't remember quite what the number is, but I think it's just under 3. And so, and that's called sticky. A sticky audience is a good audience. Because you want users to be looking at as much content on your site as you can. One thing, and I highlighted this a little bit last week with Chartbeat and during the sum and what we did, but with Chartbeat we saw that our Sanders story was trending on Reddit. David went and added a bunch of photos of Bernie Sanders to that story, because the reason it was trending is because it had Bernie beats Clinton. Big deal. He had a bunch of pictures, and our time spent on site from that Reddit referral, because they would come and they'd find a story about La Plata County and they didn't care, so they'd leave. It was about 20 seconds. David added all those photos, 7 photos or so, and we immediately saw that time spent on that story bump up to 40 seconds, because there was finally some content that they wanted to look at. And so, that we got that time spent on site bumped up a little bit, because we saw in real time what those users were doing, and what they were doing is leaving. So we made some changes to keep them there. All right, so most important overall is, how do we use these numbers? Why do we care? So basically, I think of these like circulation numbers. You know, I actually don't know what our circulation is, around maybe 6,000 or so. Does that sound accurate to folks for the Herald? And so that's the deal. It's our job to deliver the news. Do we, is it our responsibility to get the paper in front of everybody's hands? No, but we care about getting read and doing our job and informing the community. And so the more we look at and understand these numbers, the more we understand how good of a job we're doing at delivering that news to our audience and how much they're reading. That time spent on site. Sometimes I look at, I'll highlight during the sum stories that are high for time spent on that one story. And 2 weeks ago we were looking at the restaurant inspections and they were 5 minutes and 4 seconds. That's time spent on one story. That's not time spent on site. That's time spent on one story. So that means that we're doing a really good job of presenting those. People can scroll around. They can get all the information they want about the places they want. And so we're doing a really good job of delivering that information to them. Sports stories typically have tons of pieces and parts, and they typically have a higher time spent on site than news stories. And I think a big part of that is we're giving them the photos, we're giving them the art they want. We're doing a really good drill down of the sport, the gamers. And like I said, they're indicative of what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong, and not always just in reporting, writing, or editing, but also in promotion of the content online. So we're going to go look at our analytics a little bit. So let's start with Cortez. These are all of our websites that I get to look at all the time and see who's doing a good job and who isn't. There's a lot of them, as you can see. So Cortez, we're going to look at the last week of content for you guys. So you guys can see that in the last week you've had 62,000 page views, 17,000 users, and they've spent about 2.25 pages a session this time. Trent, what does this session number mean?
Times people visit.
Exactly.
How many visits?
Perfect. Now, bounce rate we don't go into too much because it's a combination of a lot of different things, but bounce rate is the number of people who looked at one page and then left. And so 63% of their audience looked at one page and then left. Normally we want that number about 45 or lower, but the bounce rate alone tells me nothing. If you get a story picked up by Drudge and you get 50,000 page views, all of those views are coming and looking at one page and bouncing. And so it'll throw your bounce rate up a lot. But on the other hand, it's good because you got more unique users from different areas. And so I think, looking at just the bounce rate is a little bit simplistic. So I'm going to dive in a little bit more here. Sorry, clicked on that one. So we're going to come in and just see how many referrals they had from Facebook this week. So 2,586 sessions referred from Facebook this week. Michael, what does that mean?
People that clicked on a link from Facebook.
That's exactly what it means. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that when you're looking at it, so that's 2,586 sessions. So that's not the number of page views we got from Facebook. That's the number of people that came over. And so then you look at this pages per session, which is about 1.87. So approximately, so they got about 4,300 page views from Facebook in the last week. So, and then just to keep diving in a little bit, so those Facebook users spent about 1:24 on the site. So Facebook's users are spending less time on site than the average viewer. Now this is an analytic that we see over and over and over again, which is that mobile Facebook users, and this is across all three sites, always account for more referrals than any other Facebook platform. In fact, really any other social media platform, and oftentimes more than any search platform. However, they always have a lower time spent on site. Always. The desktop users always have the highest time spent on site. This L.Facebook and LM.Facebook are kind of this tricky thing that Facebook did. They don't do it so much anymore. But they basically, from what I've been able to learn, kind of routed traffic through different kind of filters to try and eliminate spam. Because people were posting a lot of spam links. That make sense? Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to go over to the Herald. Samantha, what do you want to know about Herald traffic for the last week?
Time spent on site.
Luckily, we have that right here. So, so 219 time spent on site for the last week for these users. So that's a little low for us. So hopefully that'll go up and average out over the rest of the month. You can see our bounce rate is a little bit more typical of what we want, about 41%. And again, that's folks that looked at one page and then left. You can see over here, kind of, about a third of our folks that came to our website were new users. I think that's higher than, I know that's higher than normal, and I think it's due to that Reddit. Although, nope, that was last Tuesday, so I do have Tuesday in there. Okay. Did Tuesday do yesterday?
So when we're looking at the screen out in the newsroom, the news screen, and then it shows the time spent on site, and it's in seconds?
Time spent on story.
Stories?
That is the time spent on that story.
On that story. Okay.
And so that's, you add those up. So if somebody's on our centerpiece story for 23 seconds, and then they go and they check out the baseball preview for a minute, and then they go check out the restaurant inspections for 2 minutes, you add those together, and that's that user's time spent on site. So it's added. So those are time spent on stories, which is why when we do have a story that's got like 2.5 minutes spent on that story, it is a huge deal. Because one, it does mean that people typically read the whole thing, and it's a more engaged audience than we typically see.
But does it still count as that story if they hit like a photo gallery?
Nope, photo galleries trend separately, and at this point in time, they all trend as photo gallery. I'm working on fixing that with the new site so that we can break out those analytics on which galleries perform better and how far people are clicking through the galleries so that we can see, hey, we had 20 photos from a Fort Lewis College football game and people only looked at the first 5. We had 30 photos from the Fort Lewis College basketball game and people looked at all 30 consistently. So we can see, make better decisions about what our audience wants and, cover it more thoroughly.
Right, okay.
John, you want to know anything about sports stories?
What story, not for sports, for the whole newspaper, other than restaurant inspections, has had the most time on story in the last month?
All right.
You must know you're going to come out looking pretty good in this, huh?
No, that's because I make it challenging.
In the last month, let's change our time here. That'd be through the 7th, 8th, 7th. So these analytics do get a little bit wonky because of the fact that, as you can see, these top ones. So 54 minutes on this top story, which is the dark side of Craigslist. However, it's only 5 people that looked at it. So those stats can get a little bit. So when I'm pulling these, I actually go through and scroll through this first number, which is the number of users. Oh, I'm getting feedback. And try to go to one that's at least 100, because that's a decent audience to look at. So quite a ways.
What's the blue color? Is that like the user?
That's the blue is the URL.
Of the user or the viewer?
No, but it's the URL of the website.
Okay.
And then the page title. And then we've got page views, unique page views, average time on site, number of entrances, and the bounce rate. So, what was that one? So Black is coming back in America's Kitchens. That's your answer. Was that what was that story?
Yeah, what was that?
That was a real estate
Real
story.
estate.
That is interesting, to say the least. But again, you're looking at a rather small demographic. You're looking at 0.1% of the content on our site. So when I'm pulling those, I really scroll quite a ways down and find the ones that have a bigger chunk of audience on them.
So it's wire everything, right? Not just local content?
Yep, it's everything that's on the site. And it's everything that got from one page view to 1 million.
Are you able to separate Wire from local content and compare those in total analytics?
Kind of. So I can look up specific headlines, or I can look at the section of the site that it's on. So if you see like this URL here has News 01, which is local. I don't know what Nation World is off the top of my head. Michael, do you know what that
But
URL is?
you have to do it story by story. You can't just.
You can do it story by story, or you can go in. Let's see here. So News 03 right here is Nation World. So what you do is you come up here. I could tell you like 95% of what you
Well,
need to
yeah.
know.
I mean, you don't.
So you just do News 03, and what it does is it brings up all of those, all of the URLs with News 03 in them.
Hmm.
Oh, which is interesting that that shows up, because that shouldn't be. But, so you see, this looks like it's double tagged. So this is, oh, we're not in order by page view, sorry. So that Nation and World page itself, without kind of the stories, has 2,000 page views in the last month. The Zeker, Not Carnival to Go On, is the top Nation World story of the month. So yeah, you can drill in. In fact, it's far and away the top story. You can see there's about a 1,400 page view difference there. Our Nation World stories do not do well.
That's what I was trying to understand, if we had a way of looking at what we're producing and what we're editing from the wire and reprinting. So
And we've done some heat maps to see where folks are clicking, and they don't click on Nation and World, that Nation and World section, unfortunately. So, anytime you have a question about analytics, whether you think I can answer it or not and you want to know, please feel free to ask me. I may not be able to say, hey, Katie, this is the answer right now, but I can drill in and get back to you or get as close as I can to the answer. Oh yeah, we looked at one of Katie's stories and how many page views it had and time spent on site, and it's one of those things where I think it had about 300 page views, which Katie was kind of bummed about.
Oh.
But the time spent on site was it 3 minutes?
Something like, it was pretty good.
It was a really good time spent on site. So those 300 people, it might not be the 1,500 that you want, but they were reading the story. They were reading the
That
whole
was your
story.
road trip?
Yep. And so, if you want to know information about, if you want more information about Nation World Stories, we can start drilling in on that. This is not just a service for me. This is a service for you to understand how folks are using our content too. So next week, we are going to try and have Jerry in one session and Sean in another. We're going to go over how to shoot a headshot with your smartphone. Bring your smartphone. If you don't have a smartphone, that's fine. We will hook you up with one, and you will be taking pictures.
Yay!
So that's exciting.
Artistic.